evening, everybody. Welcome to Pints and Politics. It's our first event of 2025. Thanks so much for coming out and joining us tonight at the Olympic Southside Theater in Cedar Rapids. It's our first time here. We really like the venue. I'm Gazette Executive Editor Zack Kucharski. We've got a little bit of a freshened look this time, in addition to the venue. You'll notice we don't have Iowa Public Radio with us as a partner this season, so we're going to shake things up a bit. We'll have pretty familiar portions of the show, but we'll also be working in some new things, some new guests, a game at the end of each night, and we'll probably have some other segments that we introduce throughout the year. We're excited to bring the venue. There's the food truck with the menu, and they will bring the food up to you. And we'd like to say thanks to the Olympic staff and to the local food truck keeping up with the Joneses for their service, for serving us tonight. We have paper sprinkled around on the tables. So if you have a question, please submit it, and Elena and other members of the team will make sure that it makes its way up here. We'll start the conversation with the national politics, and then we'll move to state and local a little bit later on. And since our audience is full of trivia experts, we have an option where at the end of tonight, if you'd like to go best of 5 with one of the panelists, we're going to have a little news quiz. So we'll draw a name out of the bowl, and you can pick which of these panelists that you would like to go up against. Tonight on our panel, we have Gazette columnist Althea Cole. We have Tom Barton, our Deputy Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette, and Todd Dorman, our Insights and Opinion Editor, as well as columnist. So join me in welcoming them. We'll kick off looking at the national scene. We're in a period of pretty significant political transition. President Trump will be inaugurated coming on Monday, and we heard outgoing President Joe Biden give his farewell speech last night. I guess we'll start off with, how do you think history is going to remember Joe Biden? Do you think that's something that will improve over time, or do you think that there's going to be pretty harsh memories there? And it's open to whoever would like to jump in first.
Well, you probably know what I'm going to say, but no, history, I don't think history is going to be kind to Joe Biden. I mean, the commentary is not particularly kind to him right now. He had, unfortunately, a pretty rough 4 years. I will actually be writing about that in my Sunday column, so don't want to give too much of that away. But Trump, obviously, it wasn't the first time he was elected, let alone running. So the fact that he did so much better this particular past election cycle, despite everything that's happened over the last 4 to 8 years, that says that Americans were definitely ready for a change. The fact that, after everything, that Trump finally got not only an electoral college majority, but also the popular vote majority for the first time ever, that definitely says that voters were intentional about what they did. And granted, Joe Biden didn't run again, but of course that was half of the controversy right there. So yeah, they were ready for a change. They did not see anything about Kamala Harris that they particularly thought was any different about Joe Biden, or that would be any better than Joe Biden. So that's what it is.
I don't know. I think to a large extent, perceptions of Joe Biden and how we think of him are largely going to be impacted by what happens in a second Trump presidency. The way that the American people and historians, et cetera, view President Biden and his policies and what he was able to accomplish in his administration, I think to a large extent that is going to get contextualized around, again, what we see from a second Trump presidency. I will say that I think that President Biden will be remembered and recognized for passing the bipartisan infrastructure bill and just the sizable investments that we've seen in broadband, in infrastructure, in climate, green projects, green energy projects, tackling climate change and tackling projects to make the country more climate resilient. I think that will probably be remembered as a hallmark of his administration.
I do think that, well, for one thing, we don't know how history is going to judge him. It's going to be a long time before history makes that judgment. And, you sometimes get surprised by how someone's tenure sort of becomes more acceptable or less acceptable based on, as Tom said, what happens next.
But think about how we view George W. Bush these days now.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's more favorable viewed more favorably than he was when he left office. And that's true of a lot of presidents. Harry Truman wasn't terribly popular when he left office, but now he's considered a very good president. I do think Biden will go down as the first president that took climate change seriously and made investments in climate change and protecting and preparing for the consequences. I mean, he spent more money, made more investments, put it on the front burner more than any other president has. And, you know, if depending on how that goes, he may go down as a hero for that, or maybe there won't be anyone left to judge. But you know, he did some good things. I think, you know, from a political standpoint, his mistake was that he kind of came in saying that he was going to be a bridge to, you know, a new generation of leadership. And then he wasn't a bridge. He tried to hang on. And I think that was his biggest mistake, was trying to run again. Even the Democratic Party had a pretty good bench and probably could have had a really spirited and productive primary. He decided to try to keep going. And in the end, that was a huge mistake that probably, you know, cost Democrats a better shot at the presidency.
All right, flipping that around a little bit, with President Trump set to be inaugurated next week, what do you think are the most important issues to Iowa, or that Trump should prioritize for Iowa?
Well, I think obviously getting passage of a new farm bill is going to be immensely important to Iowa. Another issue, you know, that is going to impact the state, either it could benefit Iowa or it could cause a lot of consternation for Iowa farmers, is how he goes about enacting tariffs. That's a big issue and a big kind of question mark right now as to how he's going to handle trade policies and tariffs, and how those tariffs and trade policies are going to impact Iowa's agricultural economy and our exports here. You know, obviously during his first term, you had the trade war with China and the tariffs enacted there, which led to you know, the federal government paying tens of billions of dollars, you know, essentially to make Iowa farmers whole because of the disruptions and the trade issues that were caused by that. I was on a press call this morning with Iowa Republican Congresswoman Ashley Hinton, and that question came up. She was asked a question about a group of House Democrats who either have introduced or are planning to introduce some sort of bill that would prohibit the President-elect Donald Trump for using emergency powers to enact tariffs. And she was asked her thoughts on that, and you know, essentially her response was that, you know, she feels that there should be a level playing field, and that President-elect Donald Trump, you know, should be able to have all the tools in the toolbox available to him to ensure that America remains competitive on the global trade or on the global stage and in global trade, but that she believes that tariffs should be a last resort. We'll see how he uses that as a bargaining or negotiating tactic. And then, you know, we saw this, you know, I don't know if this is necessarily focused to Iowa, but I think just more broadly nationally, immigration and border security was a big issue at the forefront of voters' minds. You know, that was clear across the country, including here in Iowa. You know, and we've heard from Governor Kim Reynolds, and we've also heard from Republican lawmakers in the state that immigration policy and enforcement, you know, still remains a top concern for them. And they heard at the doors as they were door knocking and campaigning during this general election cycle that was also a top concern for voters. So I think it's going to be, I think that President Trump is going to face, you know, immense pressure to get something done and get something passed quickly to deal with immigration and to deal with border security.
You know, I do think Tom mentioned the farm bill. I think that's going to be a big issue, and I'm afraid with the makeup of Congress and the president that we're not going to see a lot of good conservation-minded provisions in that farm bill. It's going to mostly be, you know, repeat of some of the same policies that the Farm Bureau and other organizations generally support. But it's going to be interesting for agriculture. You're going to maybe have some tariffs. The Project 2025 strategy doesn't think much of federally subsidized crop insurance for one thing, and price supports. The money, the huge $1 billion tax credits that are sort of going to fund this carbon sequestration pipeline project, those might go away. If they're seen as a climate change fighting mechanism, they may just get thrown out like other things that the Biden administration tried to do. So, I think farmers voted pretty heavily and rural people voted really heavily for Donald Trump, and it will be interesting to see if his policies make them wonder why they did that, or at least question whether he's on their side as much as he sort of said during the campaign.
I think a lot of the issues that Iowans are looking for as far as the Trump agenda aren't specific to Iowa in particular. Iowans just happen to be affected by them like other states. Border security in particular. I think that Iowa might not actually quite understand the real seriousness of the crisis of those who have come over the border and been sent to other cities to, be there until the next step in the process, which is quite a nightmare. I don't think Iowans particularly grasp that, given that we don't have a whole lot of big cities and even fewer of what people would call a major metropolitan area. Des Moines would be it, if you would consider Des Moines a major metropolitan area. I did a few travels to like Chicago this past summer and a few other places, and just being there for a couple of days, I was like, wow, I thought that, I was kind of grasping what I was seeing on the news, or I was grasping the situation, and I wasn't. But I would also like to see border security act as a catalyst to immigration reform, because Iowa is going to need agricultural workers. And, if we are relying on people who entered into this country by crossing the border illegally, then if we solve that issue, that's obviously going to cause another issue. I was kind of amazed at just the diversity of people who are actually crossing the border illegally. You might get a kick out of this. I actually went on a date with somebody who crossed the border illegally. He came from Venezuela and flew to Mexico, walked over the border at Eagle Pass. And I sat down with this guy for about 5 minutes, and I said, okay, before we go any further, you should just know that I'm a Republican and I voted for Trump. So you should probably get that out of the way. And he smiled and he said, I like Trump. So we had a great evening together. Great guy. And he college educated, like I said, from Venezuela. He had just enough resources to make it to Mexico and then walk over the border. And he said, yeah, he walked with groups that probably involved people with serious crimes under their belt. He probably walked over with people who were smuggling human beings, smuggling certain items that we don't want smuggled into the country. And why did somebody with, somewhat of a source of means and an education, he was a civil engineer. He now has temporary protected status, so he is eligible to work. He was actually in town for work, which is how we met. Why did he walk across the border? Not just because it was the easiest means that were available to him, it was really the only means that were available to a lot of people because of the legal immigration system. So, the idea that Republicans are against immigration entirely, that is exceedingly incorrect. And I think that, like I said, if we address border security and we fix those issues, hopefully that will act as a catalyst so that we can tackle the legal immigration system and make sure that those who we do want to be bringing into this country have a reasonable opportunity to do so, that they're not waiting literally decades for the chance to become citizens themselves.
All right. Switching gears a little bit, several of the cabinet nominees have been in Washington, D.C. this week with the hearings, confirmation hearings. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst this week said she would support Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. And so obviously Ernst had, in November said that she or that Hegseth would have his work cut out for him getting confirmed into the Senate, met with him in December after she received a fierce amount of criticism from the right over her hesitance to his nomination. The question would be, do you think this vote eases that pressure, or that her support would ease this pressure? Or do you think there are going to be lasting impacts for Senator Ernst, even if his nomination goes through?
Well, I think, the criticism was that she wasn't adequately loyal to the president-elect and his Pickford defense secretary. And it made complete sense for someone like, someone with Joni Ernst's background to be concerned about Pete Hegseth. I mean, he had been accused of, I think, sexual assault by at least one person. Joni Ernst is a survivor of sexual assault, and she's a combat veteran. And Pete Hegseth has made several statements in the past that he doesn't think that women belong in combat. So there's two fairly big strikes, if in Joni Ernst's mind, perhaps. But then everything went crazy. You're talking about Carrie Lake coming and primarying her. I mean, maybe she wants to lose an election in every state, but but she's a native here, so it'd be, you'd be losing on your turf hasn't been your home turf in decades. Ernst, learned that there isn't going to be much room to maneuver. And, is Carrie Lake going to challenge her in a primary? No, someone will, though. She'll have a primary challenger. And as we've seen in some recent Republican primaries, Marinette Miller Meeks is a good example. I mean, a little known candidate running to the right of a sitting member of Congress can sometimes get a fairly large segment of the vote, not enough to win, but just enough to put a little bit of a scare in the incumbent. I would anticipate that she would win re-election. I don't know who Democrats are going to put up against her, but I don't think there's going to be long-term damage necessarily, but she's on their radar now. And so everything she does is going to be judged by, folks in the Trumposphere and their allies and their supporters, as, they're going to be watching whether she steps out of line again. And frankly, I wish she would, but I think she has learned that that's a bad idea.
One thing I learned in politics, because I've got a bit of a background in conservative politics, and this isn't specific to conservatives. This isn't specific to Republicans. This is specific to basically everybody, which is the stupidest people often tend to be the loudest. And that's a harsh assessment, but I said what I said, and I don't take it back because it's true. Yet another golden opportunity that I'm going to let fly right by. Man, I'm just dodging them left and right tonight. For those who didn't hear, Todd said, I tried to talk quietly, and I guess I didn't let that opportunity fly right by. Sorry about that. But yeah, I said what I said, and just in case you didn't hear it, the stupidest people are often the loudest. Will they get very far? Probably not. Joni Ernst does, I guess, kind of sort of technically have a primary challenger. I'm a bad journalist. I forgot the guy's name. I watched do you know what I'm talking about? Or
Joshua Smith.
There we go. Thank you very much. Yeah. Not a snowball's chance in where.
This is sort of the golden age of stupid, loud people in politics. So, I mean,
okay.
You can't completely count them out, but I get what you're saying. You're right.
Well, what this is the age of Trump. And another thing that I also notice in the age of Trump is that for everybody who tries to be like Trump, there is only one Trump, which means that, people who assume that if they act like him and have his support, that's not a guarantee that they're going to get elected. Ask Carrie Lake. And on that note, if Carrie Lake comes to Iowa and, decides that she's once again a resident of the state of Iowa and decides that she wants to throw her hat in the ring against Senator Joni Ernst, I should disclose that the first full campaign I volunteered on was for then candidate Joni Ernst, then state senator Joni Ernst. So you need to know that, because otherwise you're not getting the full story from me. But if Carrie Lake comes, even totally withstanding my previous, campaign participation, I would have a lot to say about Carrie Lake in my column. It would not be pleasant. It would not be flattering. It'd give me a lot of content to write about, so I almost kind of hope it happens. But at the same time, I don't think it'll happen.
Do you think she'd live with Marionette Miller Meeks?
I mean, I don't even remember the David Pouch was okay. I was about to say I don't remember the name of her challenger, but clearly I did at the last second. If he came that close with very, very little money and no name recognition outside of the Quad Cities prayer breakfast, oh God, Zach, I'm going to go home and think about that now. I really wish you hadn't said that. Yeah, it would be a different story.
I don't know that her Davenport apartment would allow another person.
There might be a lot of bedrooms. We don't know.
I'm from Davenport. I'm familiar with the apartment complex where she claims her residency, and I don't know. I don't know if there would be room for another person, but we'll see.
Okay, I think we've beaten that joke to death. I got a reminder from Elena. We have to speak into the mics. I think Todd, not to signal anybody out, but I think that one's for you. Sorry, I'm a little punchy. One of the questions from the audience is who, if any, of the candidate nominees, do you think that, Ernst's support for Hegseth is a signal that everyone is going to get through, or are there some cabinet nominees that you think are still at risk?
Like right up to the mouth, Todd. That's how you talk into the microphone. I think that Ernst was really the one that everybody was watching. All of the media, both the Democrat and Republican parties. I'm using the word catalyst again. Sorry, I'm probably going to use that a few times tonight just because I've already used it twice. Now that she has affirmed her support, I think she's the missing piece, if nothing else. So it definitely makes Hegseth's chance a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other nominees who are somewhat as controversial as Pete Hegseth, and the only one that's coming to mind is RFK Jr. And I don't know if there's enough Republicans on the other side to hang up that nomination.
Can anyone from the venue tell me whether there's fluoride in the ice? Because I'd like it removed if that's at all possible.
Such a diva.
There's no way he should be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. It boggles the mind. It surprises me more than Hegseth, frankly, because this guy's views are all over the map, and people who know what they're talking about know that he's I don't know, off his bean. So it's just really remarkable that someone with anti-vaccine, views. I'm not saying you can't argue that vaccines should be better tested or that you think the approval process needs reform or any of these things, but just basically saying that vaccines cause this, and this when real studies by real doctors and scientists show that that's not the case. So I don't know what to think, how much impact he's going to have, but I'm afraid that he's going to have a lot. And, God help us if we have another pandemic or the spread of a disease that's going to require some action on the part of the public to stop it.
I don't share the same degree of concern about RFK Jr. And believe me, like I've actually tried. Because like on the surface, his views look pretty out there. Diving a little bit deeper in, a lot of his associates have said, revoke access for that vaccine or authorization for that vaccine. In theory, I don't have a problem with medications. If something requires FDA approval, I don't have a problem with it going back for FDA approval, because if it's not FDA approved the second time, is it for political reasons, or is there something that we might not have known at the time it was approved? There are countless medications that were once on the market thought to be safe that are no longer safe. I've taken some of them. I used to take a painkiller called propoxyphene, and that has been yanked because it's had all sorts of problems for the heart. I think Vioxx, the COX-2 selective inhibitor for anti-inflammatory, billed as an anti-inflammatory that, wouldn't harm your stomach. That had major cardiac side effects. So just reviewing stuff, there still has to be genuine reason to review stuff. As far as the people who have been appointed to the smaller bureaus of HHS, the FDA, the National Institute for Health, a lot of these people really got raked over the coals during COVID for sharing concerns that were billed as very, very controversial at the time. But now, given that all of this time has passed and we've had the opportunity to learn a lot more about transmission of COVID-19 and whatnot, they weren't terribly controversial. They were only deemed controversial by political figures, by the media, and these people suffered terribly. Marty McCary, Jay Bhattacharya, the Stanford professor who's now tapped to lead the National Institute of Health, what they went through then and what they were saying at the time, and the research that they were using to support their theories, that makes me feel actually a little bit better about some of the people who will be heading up these institutes, not worse.
Well, okay, here's probably my biggest fear, not what he does necessarily, but the example he sets. We're already seeing a troubling decline in childhood immunizations in the United States because, in no small part, because of the controversy that's surrounded vaccines and been sort of ginned up by people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And that's a trend that is not going to end well. I mean, I guess people don't remember, or they're, a lot of them are alive, but people don't remember what it was like to, get measles when there was no immunization. I mean, kids died of measles. Whooping cough, same thing. The health of the country is going to rely on that. We're already seeing some measles cases and outbreaks, and we don't want to go back to the days when kids died of diseases that we can now prevent.
I definitely don't want to see that either. To your point, I agree with that because vaccines are going down. What we have to consider is that it is not one person or one party's opposition to vaccines in general. A lot of people had really negative experiences, not only with the COVID vaccine, but those who were concerned about the vaccine and were hesitant to take it right away. They were faced with the loss of their job. If you were in the military, there were thousands of people who were kicked out of the military because they did not want to be forced to take the vaccine. So I think there's kind of a broad array of reasons that overall vaccine skepticism has increased. And I think there's a lot that can be done to address that. And part of that does have to be making sure that people aren't ostracized or forced to pay serious consequences if they're not quite ready to take a vaccine. Doesn't mean that they're against them wholeheartedly or permanently. I certainly wasn't. And I took the COVID vaccine. I also unfortunately had some side effects from it, and I don't care to have any more in the future. But if the choice came down to, can you keep your job and can you keep your entire career, that becomes a problem, and that shows a lot more distrust than just in the particular vaccine itself.
All right, jump into a different topic. Last week, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced major changes to the company's approach to fact-checking. And so its fact-checkers, Zuckerberg claimed, quote, have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've earned. So henceforth, the company will remove fewer posts and will append community notes. Do you buy the free speech arguments that have been attached to this? Do you think that what do you see as the long-term implications of a decision like this? Guys,
okay,
we work with
facts,
so we better have an answer for this one.
Right? I think it's a good thing. Surprise. The issue I have with fact checking is that, and I've written about this before, and I've mentioned this before, the fact checker controls the context around the claim. And it is very, very easy for the, shall we say, the fact checking community that was previously employed to all have similar perspectives and look at things in similar or identical contexts. And the problem is you can take one issue And you can look at it in a multitude of contexts. And when that comes to actually checking facts and applying that context, you can get different results. Sometimes the fact checking misses the mark, but context complicates things because things aren't necessarily incorrect. They're just lacking in context. So Twitter does community notes, or excuse me, X. I hate that. I still call it the Twitter, but they do community notes, and those are kind of interesting. Those miss the mark sometimes, but sometimes they also do better than the fact checkers at the fact checking. One very specific example, Axios, they had an article, they put it out in a tweet saying that Kamala Harris was never made the border czar. That was in, I think, September of 2014 or 2024, excuse me. And Community Notes took that up and added a community note. And the resource that they used to say this is incorrect was Axios reporting that itself referred to Kamala Harris as the border czar, reporting that she was appointed border czar. So obviously that was a fact-checking fail. The nice thing about community notes is that it isn't one particular people. It's not even necessarily one particular set of people. It really is kind of this organic thing where people can see that readers added context. That's what the community notes say. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to fact check, not by saying we're the authority and we say yes or no, but rather if you doubt this claim or if you have concerns about this claim, here's more context so you can make a decision.
We're never going to be able to make social media tell the truth about stuff. It's just not going to happen. If you get your news from there, you're sort of, it's buyer beware or free beware, I guess it is, because you're not buying the news. Hint, hint. But it's. I would actually like them to beef up fact checking, like to check, like, was my uncle's vacation really that fun? I mean, is that baby really that cute? I mean, was that Christmas really that jolly and happy with all those smiling people, or did you take the picture and then start to fight again? I guess that's the fact checking that I would like to see from Facebook. I'd just like to clarify that all the lives I feel bad about as I live my dismal existence, that they too are also dismal in reality. That's what I want to know. That would make me feel a lot better.
All right, well said. I can't even touch that one. Last month, we had the passing of former Iowa Congressman Jim Leach. And Leach served as a representative from Iowa from 1977 to 2007. He broke with his party, endorsed Barack Obama for president. He changed his political affiliation back in 2022 and is known for public policy work and working, also is the National Endowment for the Humanities. Do you think there'll be, what do you think Leach's legacy is? And do you think, is that a bygone era? Or do you think that, that type of work will come back?
I hate to say it, but in today's political climate, I think it is a bygone era. I mean, there is no way Jim Leach would ever get elected to Congress today, especially not with President-elect Trump with the MAGA movement. They're just, unfortunately, these days, seems like there's not a lot of room for moderates within the Republican Party, conservatives. I think that Jim Leach's legacy is going to be one. I wish I could easily pull it up right now on my phone, but Governor Kim Reynolds, in her condition of the state address earlier this week, mentioned Jim Leach and honored him in her remarks, noting his passing. She also noted the passing of former Iowa Agriculture Secretary Bill Northey and asked for a moment of silence to recognize both of them. And in her remarks, she talked about Jim Leach, being an example and kind of a beacon of civility and public service, someone who fostered bipartisanship, cooperation, someone who, again, was just dedicated to being a good, kind public servant who was less interested in politics and partisanship and more interested in how can we work together to better the lives of Iowans and restore civility and trust in our government institutions, while, you know, at the same time being fiscally responsible, but not going to the extreme and working to kind of bring people together to the middle.
Didn't she say after she talked about Leach that these are the same principles that have guided my political career? Or was that just the voice in my head of
That was your dream.
of the different world I've constructed for myself to stay sane? So, yeah, Jim Leach, he's almost a little like Jimmy Carter in that his time in Congress obviously was long and important, but his second act with the Humanities Council and some of the things that he did after he was in Congress really stand out. I don't know if you read the column I wrote about him, but one of his former chief of staff said one thing that was interesting about him is that if you go to congressional offices, you'll see a lot of pictures of, oh, this congressman, here he is with the prime minister of France, here he is with the, this world leader or that world leader or the Dalai Lama. But Jim Leach in his office, he just had artwork from his collection. There weren't any sort of self-serving photos to, remind people that he was a very important man, because I think he thought that serving the people was kind of a sacred charge rather than just a way to fulfill your ambitions. And I think it's still possible to be that way. It's just you're going to have to start at the bottom and hope history shifts, and you can maybe climb to those heights too. But yeah, it was a big loss. I mean, it just was. He was a great leader and a good man, and so yeah.
So actually, I was able to find it here. Governor Reynolds, in her condition of the state, said that for 3 decades, Jim Leach modeled how to combine elected office with civility, kindness, and grace. It's a timeless lesson, and we're grateful to have benefited from his example.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. So we will be back in about 7 minutes. So if you want to freshen up a drink, order food, that would be great. Second half topics, we're going to talk condition of the state. We're going to talk about the proposal to buy part of Minnesota and a bunch of other topics. So stay with us. Thank you, everybody. We'll get going. Quick announcement I was asked to make. The food truck's going to depart at 7:15. So if you want food, please make that order now. Wanted to switch over to state and local in the second half here today. And so this week, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds presented the Condition of the State report. It's an annual kind of tradition at the start of the legislative session. And so curious the issues, what did you think of the speech? Were there issues that came up that surprised you? And was there anything that was omitted that surprised you?
A couple of things. I guess the biggest thing that surprised me is for the first time, we publicly saw Governor weigh in on the issue of passing a hands-free driving bill. It was the first time publicly that she has pressed lawmakers to pass a hands-free driving bill. I guess I was surprised to see that. We've seen hands-free driving bills in the legislature since, well, I think since 2019, but essentially, right after they passed the texting while driving ban, you saw law enforcement officials essentially push for the hands-free bill, saying that, it's almost impossible to enforce the texting while driving ban because it spells out exceptions where you can still have, a phone to your ear. You can still use the phone to make a phone call. You can still use it for navigation. And so from a law enforcement perspective, how do you actually enforce this then? And we've seen, an increase, unfortunately, in accidents and fatalities, in incidents of distracted driving. And so you've seen bills move its way through the Iowa legislature since about 2019. The Iowa Senate has passed a hands-free driving bill only for House Republicans to hit the brakes, pun intended.
You worked on that one on the drive back from Des Moines?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Uh, because you have a more libertarian wing in the House Republican caucus who feels that a hands-free driving bill is an infringement of of persons' individual rights, and feel legislation should focus on trying to curb distracted driving more broadly, generally, and not just focusing on somebody who's on their phone. Anyway, it was interesting to see the reception to that, especially from House Republicans. You had House Republicans applaud the governor for saying that and for pressing lawmakers to pass a hands-free driving bill to protect Iowans on the road. And afterward, I spoke to David Young, the former Iowa congressman and state representative, Republican from Van Meter, who's chair of the House Transportation Committee, which is where a hands-free driving bill is going to go through. And it's going to be his committee that's going to decide, whether or not that legislation is going to move forward. And he told me that he was excited and encouraged to see the governor put her support behind a hands-free driving bill. Asked House Speaker Pat Grassley about the governor, weighing in and throwing her support behind that, and if that means that, that's going to move the House Republican caucus, if it's actually going to get past the chamber and to her desk this year. And, he couched his answer a little bit, but essentially said having the governor throw her weight and her support behind the bill is definitely going to have an impact. It's definitely going to matter, and is probably going to move some Republicans, some House Republicans, to support legislation this year. Of course, the cliche, the devil's in the details. It'll depend on what bill we see and how it gets drafted. But I think that there is real hope this session for a hands-free driving bill to finally get passed, get to the governor's desk, and get signed into law.
Now, when you say hands-free driving, you don't mean that I steer with my legs or something.
Like, look, ma, no hands, like that
Yeah.
type of thing. No,
You can
that,
do
that,
something
that you would,
different,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
hard.
No, you'd have to use voice activated. Yeah.
I've just been hearing that all week. Hands-free driving. I hope no one gets the wrong idea.
Microphone to the mouth like this. They want to hear your commentary.
Well,
The one-liners don't land if you don't use the mic.
want to be
I don't.
scolded.
Yeah, I don't want to bogart the conversation, but part of your question asked any noticeable admissions. And I think one noticeable admission was that we did not see a property tax cut proposal from the governor in her condition of the state address. I say that, and I say it's noticeable because that is the number one legislative priority this year for House and Senate Republicans. And so I think it was noticeable that the governor didn't mention it. At the same time, I don't think it's that surprising that the governor didn't put out her own property tax proposal, just because of how immensely complex and complicated Iowa's property tax system is. House and Senate Republicans are, already talking. You have committee chairman in both the Senate and the House, Dan Dawson over in the Senate, who's chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, the Tax Policy Committee there, Bobby Kaufman, who is his counterpart in the House, who are working on proposals and are going to, put out their own bills, and in that process are going to involve the governor's office, and they're going to involve the governor in that conversation anyway. So I guess it's not necessarily surprising that the governor didn't weigh in there, but it is a little bit noteworthy just because tax relief and tax cuts have been such a recurring theme and priority for this governor and for state House Republicans. And obviously, we have the income tax cuts that were signed into law last year, and the flat 3.8% income tax that takes effect this year. I think it's a little bit more easier to put forward a proposal or put forward a policy when you're talking about income taxes. It's a little bit easier. It's a little bit more cleaner than when you're dealing with income taxes. It's a little bit easier. It's a little more cleaner, straightforward proposal than when you're dealing with property taxes, because of the widespread and disparate ramifications and implications of that for local governments, for cities, for counties, for school districts.
Condition of the state.
I watched it.
Were there issues that surprised you? What was your general takeaway of the speech? Were there things omitted that you thought also surprised you?
So we've already discussed this. I'm sorry to bring us back to the hands-free driving bill, but that is one of the things I find a little bit more interesting as far as the governor's support for it. And I tend to approach that from the counterpoint. Sorry to be the Debbie Downer here. I'm not a big fan of the concept of a hands-free driving bill, not because I am cool with distracted driving or using a cell phone while driving, because I'm sorry, but that's not the case. And no, I'm not sorry for that. Thank you. But at the same time, I think it focuses more on the tool than the actual activity or action, which is distracted driving. And unfortunately, the more we focus on the cell phone or the smartphone, whether it be texting or talking, holding it up, if you've got that phone on a mount and you're, looking at the phone more than the road, obviously that's going to be a problem. If you're using your phone for Google Maps to navigate and you're trying to do both, and that causes a problem, how do we thread the needle? How do we split the hairs there between what is, an enforceable error, an enforceable infraction, and what is just an honest mistake that luckily didn't result in something serious? It's harder to legislate than a lot of people, perhaps even the governor, are considering at this point. It also doesn't take into account that plenty of extremely bad things can happen with distracted driving that doesn't involve the phone at all. When I was 19, my first semester of college, I was at Kirkwood and I took a night class, and there was a young married couple who had just been in a moderately severe collision with actually a girl with whom I went to high school, so I knew her. And the entire reason she plowed into their vehicle was because she'd gotten gum in her hair and was trying to get the gum out of her hair. It just boom, right into them. And luckily it wasn't so severe that they were, badly injured, but at the same time, this was gum. It wasn't a cell phone. This girl didn't even have a cell phone. People eat behind the wheel of the car. I confess I'm guilty of that. I got my French fries right next to me or something worse. But just with the whole load of distracted driving, I don't know if focusing on a smartphone might have consequences that we're not thinking about.
And that's exactly why a hands-free driving bill has not been able to pass the House.
I mean, look, we've got those libertarian-leaning, principled conservatives in the House, in the Senate, but I don't think it is just that component. Like you said, there, like we all said, there are more components than just no freedom.
Well, there's one thing that the governor said that didn't get a lot of attention. Is, she talked about doing this work requirement for Medicaid, which I know that sounds like a good idea to people. Able-bodied people should be working, which, the numbers will tell you 2 out of 3 Medicaid recipients are already on the job. The ones that aren't are generally elderly or disabled. And what it really does is it knocks eligible people out of Medicaid because they can't navigate the bureaucracy of the work requirement. And so people fall off the rolls. So I think that'll get a little more attention as we go through, but luckily there'll be $1 billion unemployment insurance tax cut for businesses. So, not everyone can win, right? You can either have medical care or not. But yeah, she cuts, as Tom mentioned, the governor said, proudly that they'd cut income taxes by $24 billion. And over, what is it, a decade? She added that up. And so a lot of her speech was kind of, sort of smaller state investments, reliance on a lot of federal money to do things. Because, once you cut into the revenue enough, sort of the days of big initiatives and expensive things are kind of over. And I think that's the era that we're going into now. They're going to cut property taxes, which is going to be, the way they do it is probably going to be bad news for local government. But yeah, as far as the state's concerned, tax cuts was the priority last few years. And And now the priority is making sure that they can afford those tax cuts, cover any revenue gaps that exist. They socked away quite a bit of money to do that. Hopefully it'll be enough.
One of the topics that came up in the condition of the state was also asking legislators for $1 million to fund a new partnership between Iowa HHS and the University of Iowa in terms of cancer research and to look at the causes. It's worth noting, and we've written about it extensively, Iowa has the second highest rate of new cancer cases the last 2 years and has the nation's fastest rising rate. An audience question that kind of builds on this: what do you predict the response is if it shows it's due in part or large part to exposure to chemicals and agriculture?
I mean, I guess it's going to depend on when that comes out and if anything politically has changed in Iowa. But I mean, as long as we continue with kind of the political status quo, and as long as we continue, I think, with Republican control of the lawmaking process, I don't know that, I guess, you would see substantial changes to change current practice in terms of making farmers, change their farming practices. Iowa for the last, I don't know, decade plus has relied on, voluntary programs for trying to reduce the nutrient load in our waterways and trying to improve water quality. I don't see them passing any regulations that are going to directly curtail chemical applications. I mean, we see them, or they've said that one of the things they're going to do this year is they're going to reintroduce the bill that oh man, Todd, help me. How do you pronounce it?
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate. Thank you. Roundup. Yes, Roundup. The bill to help out. Well, I guess it's Bayer now, isn't it? Bayer, yeah, that bought Monsanto. Anyway, that helps them out and kind of provides some legal protection to them from lawsuits filed against them about Roundup causing cancer and leading to illnesses. So I mean, given that, I don't know that if the study shows that pesticides and pharmacide and all that stuff, or insecticides, excuse me, pharmacide is not a word, I don't think. I don't know where that came from.
It is. It means murder of a pharmacist. So well done.
All right. Well, not the way I intended, but anyway. Yeah, I don't know that you would see any substantial regulations put in place. I think it would be more freeing up money to help farmers who choose to implement different conservation practices to cut back on applications.
Well, and I don't really know how this is going to work. I mean, if she appoints this group of epidemiologists, I'm not, sure where. I mean, I guess University of Iowa, they'll probably be from some other places. I actually don't know whether she'll even be obligated to release the report once it's completed. I don't know from an open record standpoint what would govern that, but yeah, if it shows that water long-term exposure to low levels of nitrate is a cancer causing factor, things like that, I don't know that they would want to release that, because that's going to give the people who want change, want to clean up the water, want to do more conservation, and don't want it to be voluntary anymore. They want it to be regulatory. That's going to aid their cause. I don't know that they'll want to put that information in the public sphere. Maybe they have to. Like I say, I don't know how this will work.
Right. I want to switch to a local topic. We're in a critical stretch of time for the Cedar Rapids casino proposal. Tom, you had coverage this week in terms of the introduction of a possible extension of or introduction of a new moratorium. And so the question from the audience is, will the casino moratorium pass in time to stop a racing and gaming commission vote, or what do you predict is the outcome? And so we'll take a prediction from each of you.
Don't know.
That's not fair, but
I mean,
I get it.
Yeah, I don't want to put myself in a tough position as a reporter covering this issue. But anyway, what I can say is that in my conversations this week with Representative Bobby Kaufman, who's the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and is putting the bill forward, he told me that he planned on filing legislation today, although I hadn't looked by the time that I left Des Moines to get here to see if it had been filed, and that his plan is that there would be a subcommittee hearing on it next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, and that closely following, probably that following week, there would be a committee hearing on the bill. So it seems like there is a possibility, a scenario where the House will be able to get the bill out potentially in the next 2 weeks. I foresee that the bill is going to pass the House just like it did last year in the waning early morning hours at the end of the session. The House passed it at the very last minutes of the 2024 legislative session. It was largely because of that timing that the Senate didn't take it up. Now, it's still an open question as to what the Senate is going to do and whether the Senate would pass the bill. I spoke with Senate President Amy Sinclair this week and asked her that, and she said, it's too early to say, it's too early to predict what Senate Republicans are going to do, especially since, as of when I talked to her, we didn't have a bill. There's no language, nothing has been introduced in the Senate, and so it's an open question there. My sense of things from talking to lawmakers is that I don't know that anything has really changed in the Senate to get a casino moratorium through. I mean, again, last session, it was largely timing, but also it was because the votes weren't there in the Senate. Now, you do have a new, different Senate Republican caucus this year. I don't know if it's different enough to really change the outcome. We'll see, but it's a very, very tight window for them to try and get a bill passed and to the governor and signed before the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission is expected to make a decision on a Cedar Rapids casino license. The IRGC is set to meet on February 6th and to take up the Cedar Rapids casino license and make a vote one way or the other as to whether to grant Lynn County a gaming license. I don't know that there is going to be enough that lawmakers, especially in the Senate, that the lawmaking process is going to be able to happen fast enough and quick enough to make that possible, that they'll be able to get a bill passed, under that deadline, to get something done before the IRGC makes a determination.
My own forecast calls for a 5% chance of casino, and that's whether the legislature acts or not. Obviously, if the legislature rams this moratorium through, that's the story. I think the marketing studies that came out that show still some considerable cannibalization by a Cedar Crossing casino of revenues from other casinos, Riverside, the Isle, and Waterloo. I mean, it's going to be tough for a Racing and Gaming Commission to basically vote to take business away from existing casinos and give it to a new casino. I know that this is America and we're supposed to like competition, but that's not how the Racing and Gaming Commission works. Casinos are kind of a cartel that protects their turf, as I've written before. Probably mentioned that I'm addicted to writing about gambling, not gambling itself. But I just, it's hard for me to see how it makes it. But on the, one thing I will say about the legislative possibilities, it's like, why do we have a Racing and Gaming Commission if the legislature is going to take over their purview on whether licenses are going to be offered. You know, the legislature already wants to be the state school board, and they want to be the board of supervisors and the city council and everything else where they can rule by sort of legislative edict. The governor bragged last night at one point that they've centralized government. Did you ever think you'd hear a Republican governor brag about centralizing control of government? So, yeah. So I mean, they're sort of messing in a lot of spaces where they're not needed. This is probably one of them, but there's a lot of money at stake, and I'm sure that the folks in Riverside, Dan Keel and his friends, will be very happy if Bobby Kaufman comes through for them.
Sorry, two quick things to add to that I forgot. I asked Bobby Kaufman if he has a partner in the Senate that's going to help him run his bill, and his response is TBD. So I think that's telling that, at least at this point, he doesn't have a sponsor in the Senate to help him run his bill. And two, to what Todd was talking about, Senate President Amy Sinclair said she has her own personal reservations, and that, look, we've established the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission for a reason. They have a function, a job, and a responsibility to do, and there is no guarantee that the IRGC is going to grant a Lynn County gaming license, considering that twice before it's rejected it. And then now you have these market studies that show that, to a large extent, a Cedar Rapids casino is going to be drawing players and revenue away from existing casinos. Now, Cedar Rapids Mayor Tiffany O'Donnell and other casino backers will argue that the market studies show that a Cedar Rapids casino would actually generate more revenue than previous studies, and that the cannibalization is less than what previous studies have projected, in that one of the studies show that there would still be $60 million of new revenue to the state, and that $60 million is, nothing to turn your nose up at. But my sense of things from lawmakers that I've talked to is that at least Senate Republicans kind of are taking the view of, let's let the process work out. We don't know, or we don't think that anything has materially changed with Iowa's gaming industry and market to where the IRGC is all of a sudden going to think that a Cedar Rapids casino is going to be a good bet.
But think of the kids. What about the STEM lab? The STEM lab. Hey kids, let's talk about how some technology and how we filter tobacco smoke out of the air.
All right. We are
It's
tight
bad
on,
if your kid comes home smelling like the
we are
casino.
tight on time. And I'm going to break away from the tradition a little bit. There's several questions that have been asked. This week we were in the news, and I'll just read one of these. The Gazette will only be printed 3 times a week beginning in mid-February. I understand this online trend. I understand increasing costs. But this makes me sad. It's vital that we're exposed to information that we disagree with. We will need to explore the Green Gazette. I'm sure this was a difficult decision. Can you talk about it? I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about that. First of all, I've been with the organization for 25 years. I started as an intern. I've grown up through that organization and have the privilege to be a member of the leadership team of the organization. This was not an easy decision, but it is a decision that we feel that's essential in terms of keeping the journalists and focus on the journalism. This is a platform change. I understand we have thousands of relationships. Everybody, has a different relationship, a different entry point. But we feel that in looking at the trends and the costs, the best way that we can have a stable runway is to introduce those changes. The Green Gazette is going to be the focal point of our initiative forward, because that is the familiar digital experience. I want to be clear that we will be printing newspapers Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. Those are our most read editions, but also we have information back there Elena's holding up about accessing and how to have digital access if you don't already. But We will continue to produce digital editions of the Green Gazette, even on days where there is not a printed newspaper. The news operation will continue, and we are focused on continuing to produce information 7 days a week. We will continue to talk. There are a million questions that come off of this, and we will be continuing to talk about that this weekend and beyond. And so our focus now is to figure out how to make the best transition for as many readers. You know, as somebody who has someone living at Cottage Grove every night, and I walk in and I see the folks on the floor reading the paper every day, I think about it the minute I leave the Gazette and stop there on my way home. It's crucial that we don't leave readers behind. I've been touched in the reaction that we've received from folks that have wanted to give ideas and then notes of support from all over. And you just even in the room tonight, there have been several folks sharing ideas of, hey, you know, have you thought about this? Can we try this? And so, you know, please, we are working through all of those ideas, working to get things implemented as quickly as we can. Our ask is to be patient, to try. And, you know, it is crucial for communities like ours in this region to have a local news source. And so we feel that this gives us the best chance, and we're continuing to push forward with that. And, you know, I just want to say for all of the subscribers in the room, thank you for that. And we, you know, it goes without saying, but, you know, communities that have a strong local news presence have more engagement, civic engagement. People vote. They know who the mayor is. They may not like the mayor, but they know who it is. You know, communities also have less corruption. It's better to do business. It's more affordable to do business, and studies have shown those types of results. And so our focus is on driving that forward. In making the decisions, we looked at papers across the country that have had positive results as part of that. And so that has been our focus. And so it is an extremely difficult journey, you know, but I've been heartened by the entire team, the response of the team, even those who we had to, you know, deliver difficult news, the carriers and members of the distribution team who have, you know, significant changes as a result of that. But you know, I just want to say that we will continue to carry on. And if you have questions, happy to answer those. But wanted to at least spend a couple minutes talking about the rationale. We'll continue to talk about that going forward. So I will jump back to questions of the panel. Thank you. So we've gotten a lot of questions. I'm actually surprised from the audience. So we've been hearing a lot about border and territory changes, but now there's one involving, you know, a 51st state up north. You know, now Senator Mike Busolo has introduced a bill to annex or buy 9 counties from Minnesota. And the question is, you know, is this for real? Neither governor has touched it. And, you know, some of the other Senate Democrats have said he's just trying to get media attention, and maybe we're playing into that here tonight.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to play into that. That's what it's for.
So what's your read? Will Floyd of Rosedale have a shorter trip across state lines?
Yeah, I'm from north central Iowa, so I've spent some time in these 9 counties, and I'll tell you, they
North
do
central Iowa or
North
north
central
Minnesota,
Iowa, just a stone's throw from this low tier of Minnesota counties, and they do look a lot like Iowa. I will tell you that.
They do not feel a lot like Iowa. Okay, I just went to Minnesota last Friday, and literally I crossed the border, and all of a sudden the road was so much smoother, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, well, that's one thing we would inherit, at least for a while. You know, this could be big. I mean, we would suddenly become home to the Spam Museum in Austin, Minnesota. I mean, we'd get Albert Lee and Fairmont and Worthington, all fine cities. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in Blue Earth? I mean, there's a little town on the border too that has part of the town in Iowa and part of it in Minnesota, and so that would solve that.
I think I've gotten a traffic ticket there.
Yeah, and then there's you know, there would be a Keister, Iowa, which would also be fun. So yeah, but the thing is, once you take those 9 counties, then, I mean, where do the territorial ambitions end? I mean, that's the problem. Do we try to take the Mississippi or the Missouri? Do we,
No. We are not taking the top row of Missouri counties.
Well,
no, absolutely not.
Well, it's,
But there's barbecue and fireworks.
I'm not trying to like lower our collective IQ or raise Missouri's collective IQ.
Well, I'm sure our friends from Missouri would be very unhappy to hear you
Case
say
in
that.
point, who pronounces a state ending in I as Missouri? I never understood that. Can anybody answer that question for me? It's not necessarily rhetorical.
We pronounce Madrid and
Nevada,
Tripola, and so we're guilty too. We miss, we're not exactly on the ball with our pronunciation.
Tom, I mean, you cover the first few weeks of the legislature is kind of a wild card. What are these types of ideas? I mean, what that get floated? I mean, how do you decide which ones to pursue and take seriously?
Yeah, I mean, it requires talking to legislative leaders and other lawmakers to figure out, okay, does this bill essentially have legs? Is this going to go anywhere? Is this really serious? Is this going to get a subcommittee? Is this something that the chair of the committee really plans on advancing? So, like, for example, I wrote a story today about a bill that was introduced by Representative Taylor Collins. He's a Republican from Minneapolis. It is a bill that would have Iowa follow Louisiana. Louisiana this summer became the first state in the country to permit judges to order surgical castration as a punishment for certain sex offenders. And so you see these bills filed, right? And you go, you look at it and you wonder, okay, is this going to go anywhere? Does this really have legs? Is this something that I should be spending my time writing about? And so I went to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. So the bill got assigned to the House Judiciary Committee. I spoke to the chairman, Representative Steve Holt, a Republican from Denison, and said, are you going to assign this to a subcommittee? Are you going to move this forward? And his response is, yes, I'm going to give it a subcommittee hearing because I want to hear the discussion. I want to hear the perspectives on this. So then, then I decided, okay, this is something worth writing about this issue, and Republicans taking kind of the tough on crime stance, and that we need to be implementing, I guess, more extreme measures for sexual predators. It should be noted that the bill would pertain to those who have been convicted of serious sex crimes against children. It would apply to, Iowa potentially would follow Louisiana to do this, and kind of those who have committed, these serious sex crimes against a victim who I think is under the age of 13. Then you talk to victims advocates and they say, look, legislation like this, harsher penalties like this, we really question whether this is really going to do anything to reduce incidences of sexual abuse and sex crimes, right? There are evidence-based management strategies out there for sex offenders that have been showed to lower recidivism, that again are evidence-based, and a threat of castration is not going to do anything. It's not a preventative tactic that is based in evidence or science, disregarding the huge legal and ethical questions involved in something like this. But again, the fact that this is something that a segment of House Republicans feel is important to put forward, and is something that they feel, should generate consideration or should at least generate some sort of debate. That's kind of how you decide, what do you take seriously? What do you write about? And
when to annex part of Minnesota.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, we want to end tonight's event with the new game, and we had a brave soul, Kaylin Aaron, nominate herself to come up and do best of 5 against one of these panelists. So come on up. And I should just say, as we're going through things, our next event will be February 27th, and we're down in Iowa City at Big Grove for that. And so as Kaylin joins us, we're going to figure out who she wants to take on in a best of 5 in the news quiz. Who do you want? No, you're going to be racing each other to answer. We're going to do this trivia. And you gotta,
essentially, the question is, who do you think is the dumbest up here?
yes, that is the answer to aim for. I'll give you a bell. The first one to ring the bell with the answer.
Okay. He's saying Todd's the dumbest.
No, Althea, you're not playing. It's just Todd and Kaylin. You can laugh, you can mock.
I thought I got to play. That's no.
No, we get to pick one. So, okay. So I'll be clear in writing my rules for next time, and we'll practice this. First one to answer, ring the bell, give the answer, and best of 5. So, Bob Uecker, the famed Milwaukee Brewers announcer, passed away at the age of 90. He was known as Mr. Baseball. Who gave him this nickname? Yes. What do you think?
Babe Ruth.
It was not Babe Ruth.
Mr. Baseball.
Think entertainer.
Johnny Carson?
It is Johnny Carson.
Really?
He had appeared. Uecker appeared on Carson about 100 times. So it was Johnny.
Yeah.
Okay. During his farewell address last night, President Joe Biden talked about a unique design feature of the Statue of Liberty. What was it?
Her large breasts.
Oh, well, Joe did not talk about that to my knowledge. But
It's a good thing IPR is no longer a partner in this.
he did talk about her ability to sway. And she was built to sway.
Makes sense.
Okay, in the spirit, we may not get to 5 because I only did 7 questions, but note to self on this game next time. The weather forecast for midday Monday during Trump's inauguration is slated to be in the mid-20s. Which U.S. president had the coldest inauguration on record, temperature-wise?
Was it like Ronald Reagan's second swearing in?
It was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
below 0 or something. They didn't have a parade or anything. They just
So in 1985, his second inauguration, the noon temperature was 7 degrees. So Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has said that her administration was doing Doge, I'm sorry, Doja Cat, before it was cool, referring to the Federal Department of Government Efficiency that President-elect has appointed. But this Iowa politician said this state program has been doing Doge-like activity since 2018. Who was it?
Rob Sand,
It was Rob Sand.
the auditor, who would be governor, maybe.
But
He
likes
just put out a
pie.
fundraising email today saying that he raised $8.4 million.
4 million.
So here we'll do one just for fun because I'm a science nerd and I've had a tough week, so it's my rules. A Dallas-based company, Colossal Biosciences, says it's trying to bring 3 different species back from extinction within the next 10 years. Name one. What are they trying to bring back from extinction?
Moderate Republicans.
What did
Well done, Tom. Well done.
What did he say?
I said moderate Republicans.
Moderate
Jim
Republicans?
Leach. We're going to reanimate Jim Leach.
Well, the real answer is it's the woolly mammoth maybe the opposite, the dodo, and the Tasmanian tiger. So
Yeah, I was gonna say dodo, but
Is the Tasmanian devil still a thing?
was
Yeah.
the Tasmanian devil?
We haven't killed that yet.
well,
So
Bugs Bunny has tried, but I think that's all I know. That's where I get my animal expertise.
all right. Well, one last one. Millions of TikTok users are on edge about what will happen with the social video platform. So the question is, how many millions of users are in the United States for TikTok? Or might be impacted by this?
Is it like 50 million or
170 million.
107?
That's right, Tom. 170 million.
What's the population of the United States?
That's about 50% of the United
Jesus.
States.
Really?
I'm guessing you're not on TikTok, Todd?
I actually am on TikTok, but
All right.
I did not know that every
Todd, do you make
Every-
TikToks?
no.
Oh,
My daughters.
Because I mean, if you did, I would sign up for TikTok.
Yeah. I don't know what I would do. Wouldn't be very exciting. And I don't think the Chinese would care one bit about it, but
well, Kaylin, I'm sorry Todd was the winner tonight, but we appreciate the effort. Thanks for playing. You know, it's good that it turned out that way because we didn't talk about prizes. And so if it had gone the other way, I'm afraid we would have had a problem. I want to thank everybody tonight. That we're going to leave it there for now. It's a great round and a good show overall. Thanks for joining us tonight in Nubo for Pints and Politics. Thank you to our panelists, Todd, Althea, and Tom. Thank you to our venue, the Olympic Southside Theater. And then remember, our next Pints and Politics is February 27th. Thank you all. Have a great night. Drive home safe.